I teach law and economics at an institution just the other side of this legislature, but my wife and I have a retirement farm in Grey Highlands, so I spend my time between the two communities. I've spent most of my academic career, almost 40 years in this province, studying the various aspects of public policy, including, for the last 15 years, the electricity sector. Let me deliver in a short form a bill of indictment against what I regard as the most ill-conceived public policy initiative I have observed in my 38 years of experience in this country. Let me first start with local impacts. First, potentially adverse health effects that Dr. McMurtry has spoken about. Second, potentially adverse effects on local property values, which the wind industry continues to deny, but in rural communities that attract citizens because of their scenic value, this is impossible to believe. Three, potentially adverse effects on the local environment. And here we need to acknowledge that the environmental review process in this province is a sham. That is, as the Ministry of the Environment itself says, this is a proponent-driven process. That's a euphemism. That is, the wind developers are assessing environmental impacts of their own projects for themselves. Every request for an elevation or a more intensive review has been declined by the ministry. Now almost 40 cases of rejections. So who is doing the environmental assessment? It's the wind developers. So finally, on the local impacts, the subversion of local democracy is a disgrace. This government was elected in 2003 on a mandate that it was going to pursue the most ambitious agenda of democratic renewal. That's what they said in the province's history. Their first major move was to deprive local governments of any responsibility for planning functions with respect to wind turbines. So local government, that is where citizens and their representatives have the most detailed information of local impacts, have been taken out of the equation. That is democratic renewal. So there are the four local indictments. Adverse health effects, adverse effects on property values, adverse effects on the local environment and the lack of any meaningful environmental review process, and the subversion of local democracy.
Shame on them.
But the bill of indictment does not end there. One might say, well, these are local impacts. If one lives in the city around here, why should we care? Well, let me tell you why people in the city should care. First, this policy is an economic disaster. Electricity generated by wind costs 2 to 3 times as much as conventional electricity. Average householders' electricity bills are going to go up by 25% in the next couple of years. This is several $100, $300 or $400 a year. As Mr. Smitherman said, 1% a year. So people are going to be paying through their pocketbooks for this misdirected policy.
The Simpsons show how unreliable wind power is. Watch the Simpsons show.
So I'm making an argument as to why city dwellers should be concerned about these policies. It's going to cost them dearly in the pocketbook. Let me just put the numbers, these economic numbers, in perspective. A couple of weeks ago, the Ontario Power Authority let out 8 billion with a B, of new wind contracts. This is on top of a 7 billion with a B contract to Samsung a few weeks before that. That's $15 billion. Add to the $15 billion the additional costs of building out the transmission grid to accommodate these wind turbines. Add several more $1 billion for that. Add some more $1 billion for contracts that were let out previously, and you're up at $20 to $30 billion. That is a big number. The provincial deficit this year is $20 billion. More money is being spent on wind turbines than the entire provincial budget deficit. Now you might say, well, the money might be worth spending if it was generating some significant environmental benefits. And of course the government claims that it will reduce CO2 emissions from other forms of electricity generation. Every study that has looked at this issue has found that the impact on CO2 emissions of wind turbines is next to zero. Next to zero? Why is that? Because most of the time, 3/4 of the time, they're not running. And moreover, when they will run is completely unpredictable. One day they will be generating 1,000 megawatts of electricity. The next day they may be generating nothing, or 1 megawatt. What does the government think? Where does the government think the electricity is coming from when wind power goes from 1,000 megawatts to 1 megawatt? Is it coming out of the air? Is it a rabbit to be pulled out of a hat? No. It means that other generation is required at all times to support wind, because wind is so unreliable. And when you net out the effects of wind-generated electricity, once one takes account of the backup generation required, the CO2 reductions are trivial to zero. So the $20 to $30 billion we've already spent, and we've committed our children and grandchildren to pay for under 20-year fixed-price contracts, will generate next to nothing in terms of greenhouse gas emission reductions. So let me turn to my last indictment of these policies, and that is that they are supposed to create a whole host of new green jobs. This 50,000 new green jobs that the government talks about, but this of course entirely fails to take account of the fact that with the increase in electricity costs, consumers have fewer dollars in their pockets, industries and businesses face higher costs and become less competitive, and jobs will be killed by this increase in cost. Every study in every other jurisdiction finds that almost no net jobs are created by these policies, and such jobs as are created come with public subsidies of anywhere between $100,000 and $300,000 per job per year. So when you take account of the economic costs of wind power, the trivial effect in terms of reducing CO2 emissions, and their negative effect on employment, who would ever in their right mind support this set of policies? So as I said at the beginning of my comments, I've been studying the public policy making process in this province and often participating in it, in particular in electricity sector reform. I have never, ever, in the course of my career here, seen a set of policies that threatens to divert and dissipate such a vast amount of this province's resources and its natural heritage, and promise so little in return. Thank you very much.